gentlemen, Will Corcoran, your friendly Alpine District Executive here, and we're talking about our Webelos Walkabout adventure this month for our den meetings. So, Webelos Walkabout, first before we get too far into it, make sure that you're drinking plenty of water when you're in the outdoors. And make sure you know where the bathroom is. So, if you're watching this inside your home, hopefully you know where it is. If you're watching this in your meeting place, use this time to point out where the restrooms are. Okay, so we're going to have a quick safety moment at the beginning of this presentation. We're going to talk about first aid kits a lot tonight, so it makes sense that we would talk about them now. First aid kits are a critical piece of equipment in the outdoors. You should always have one, whether you're going on a 5-minute day hike, an overnight backpacking trip, multi-day. Pretty much anytime you go outside, it's a good idea to have a first aid kit with you. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth here in a little while. So, Webelos Walkabout, I have the requirements right here. So we're going to do requirements 1 through 4, and there are 2 other ones that we have the option of doing one or the other. So the first one is we're going to plan a hike or an outdoor activity. So we're outdoors today. It's a lovely day in September 2020. We just got snow the last couple days. We'll cover that in just a second as well. We're going to assemble a first aid kit suitable for our hike or activity. We'll be covering what's in this first aid kit, as well as what you could do to make it your own. We're going to recite the outdoor code and leave no trace principles, and then we're going to discuss how we would use those on our hike outside. We're also going to go on a hike with our den or a family member at least 3 miles. Before our hike, we're going to plan and prepare a nutritious lunch or snack, and then we're going to enjoy it on our hike and clean up afterwards, because cleaning up in the outdoors is important. And then we're going to be doing requirement 5 today: describe and identify from photos any poisonous plants and dangerous animals and insects you might encounter on your hike or activity. So we'll be talking about some of the flora and fauna here in Colorado. So, first thing we're going to do, we are going on a hike. I'll put a nifty little graphic up here. We're going to be planning a hike at South Valley Park down in Littleton, Colorado. It's on the southwest side of Metro Denver. It's in the Red Rocks area, and it's got some really beautiful views, and it fits our distance quite nicely with half-a-mile hikes to 3-mile hikes if that is what you're interested in. It's rated as easy in all of the resources that we've accessed in preparation for this presentation. It takes about an hour to 2 hours to do the hike, depending on how far you go. 2 hours is about what you should expect it to take with Webelos and Arrow of Light age Scouts. So you can do an out and back, or you can do a loop on that. And it's an all year round trail. People go hiking in it during the summertime here in Colorado. People will also hike and snowshoe on it during the winter time when we get a lot of snow. So we'll put up a map here. So, a couple of the things that you want to think about when you're planning this hike, right? You want to be thinking about, A, we've identified where we're going, right? We know that we're going to the South Valley Park trails. We know that it is in town, so we don't have to worry about driving a huge amount of distance, but it is about 20 minutes outside of downtown Denver, 20-30 minutes depending on where you're at in town. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate equipment: first aid kits, water bottle, a day pack to carry all of your stuff in, some sturdy footwear. I'm wearing boots today, as well as a hat and some other protection. It's very cool today. You also want to make sure that you're wearing sun protection. Pretty much make sure you have the 10 essentials with you. And we'll put those up here as well. Okay, so we know that we're going down there. Make sure you look at the weather. As I said, it's September 10th today, September 10th, 2020 here in Colorado. We just got snow the last 2 days. Depending on what state you're in, especially if you've lived there for a while, you probably know kind of the general weather patterns for your time of year, but you want to make sure that you look at weather reports, look at multiple weather reports if you have that capability, and make sure that you are planning appropriately. Because here in Colorado, in August or September, generally I don't bring a bunch of heavy clothing, but on a day like today, where it's a little bit cooler, I might bring a fleece or a down jacket or some rain gear, because it is kind of cloudy, it might rain. Okay, so that concludes requirement 1. Next up, Lisa, if you'd like to come over here, we'll take a look at this first aid kit. So we've got our first aid kit. Now this is one that I bought, but have added some additional materials to as well. I really like Adventure medical kits, but you can find just about any brand out there. Band-Aid makes one. You can find them at your supermarket, Walmart, hardware store. It's probably harder to find a store that doesn't sell first aid supplies in some form or fashion. Okay, so the nice thing about this one is it comes in this nice sealed package. Make sure you take care of your trash. So some of the things that you might want to have in here. Tweezers. If you get a splinter or you get some kind of object in your finger, or you step on something, you might be able to dislodge it with tweezers. An ACE wrap. So an elastic bandage of some kind, you can use this for providing compression if you roll your ankle or if you need to splint something. Lots of uses there. Some more elastic. Moleskin. Moleskin is perfect. You want to have some moleskin on your, or in your first aid kit. If you don't know what moleskin is, if you get a blister on your foot, what you can do is it comes out in little rings, and you can cut a circle around it, and you can put it on there, and it relieves pressure on that injury. We've got some other stuff in here. We've got some iodine wipes, some alcohol prep pads, maybe ibuprofen packets, something like that. Just something that if you do get an injury on you that penetrates the skin, that you can get that cleaned out really good in the field. Like I said, there's some more pills. And then we've got miscellaneous bandages. We've got some smaller band-aids, if you want to zoom in on that. We've got some gauze pads, other stuff. We've got some nitrile gloves. Body substance isolation is very important. You don't want to get other people's bodily fluids on you. And then we've got more band-aids. And then of course, we've got tape. We've got some duct tape in here because duct tape's good for everything. A Scout is prepared. You can fix just about anything in the world that's broken with duct tape. We've also got some cloth medical tape to help secure those gauze dressings that we've got. Let's see if I can get it back in here as nicely as I pulled it out. Okay. And of course, if you have any questions on any of this stuff, make sure to ask your den leader if you're a scout, or your parents, or if you are a volunteer and you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to me in my office or by email at will.corcoran@scouting.org. My contact information is on the Denver Area Council website. More than happy to help you out with that stuff. So that fulfills requirements 1 and 2. So requirement number 3, we're going to recite the outdoor code as well as the principles of leave no trace. So the outdoor code is as follows. As an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, be careful with fire, be considerate in the outdoors, and be conservation minded. Along with the outdoor code, we also have the 7 principles of leave no trace. Something really cool for all of those of us that are involved in scouting here, especially in Denver, but also in Colorado in general, is the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. The organization that developed and promotes the 7 principles of Leave No Trace is based here in Colorado. It's based up in Boulder. So, the 7 principles of Leave No Trace are: plan ahead and prepare, travel and camp on durable surfaces, dispose of waste properly, leave what you find, respect wildlife, and be considerate of other visitors. So let's break that down real quick. We'll start off with the outdoor code. So we're being clean in our outdoor manners, being careful with fire, being considerate of others, and being conservation minded. These principles the principles of Leave No Trace and the outdoor code are very closely intertwined. We want to make sure that we're being clean in our outdoor manners. So what that means to me is, A, we're making sure that we're not leaving trash laying around. We want to make sure that we preserve these resources for everyone to use. We're also making sure that we're being respectful of the resource. So that ties in a little bit with be considerate in the outdoors, but we want to make sure that we're not destroying property, graffitiing stuff. We want to make sure that we're hiking on appropriate trails, we're not hiking on closed trails, and just generally conducting ourselves in a scout-like manner. We want to make sure that we're careful with fire, especially here in Colorado. This year we've had multiple tens if not hundreds of thousands of acres of fire. Currently today, September 10th, 2020, the Cameron Peak fire is still burning with minimal containment, and it has consumed over 100,000 acres of land at this point. So we want to make sure that we're not causing any wildfires like that, especially this time of year when it's a lot drier and fire conditions are a lot more severe. All this kind of ties together. So we're being considerate in the out of doors, right? If we're taking care of our resources and we're being pleasant to be around, we're not being too boisterous, interrupting other people's experience, we're being considerate of others. And all this ties in. Conservation is the idea that we can utilize a resource without destroying it. So we can go and hike on these trails by having trails instead of having people just walk all over the grass and everything else. We can concentrate that impact into a smaller area to leave a much greater pristine area. Along with that, the principles of Leave No Trace. So plan ahead and prepare. We've already been doing that. We've discussed gear that we want to bring. We've been discussing where we want to go. We have discussed some of the considerations that you want to make sure that you take, such as, maybe additional gear. Part of the reason that we want to plan ahead and prepare is if you get into a situation that you're not prepared for, right, you might need assistance, a lot of assistance to get out of it. Now, our hike that we have planned today is unlikely to require the assistance of search and rescue groups. But if we are going hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park or another high adventure locale, such as Philmont Scout Ranch, if we get in there and we aren't prepared mentally and physically with gear and proper physical conditioning, we might require a lot of assistance to get out of there. So, plan ahead and prepare. Travel and camp on durable surfaces. We already touched on this a little bit. So we want to make sure that we're sticking to trails. If we're camping, we want to make sure that we're using established campsites. The reason that we have all of these things, like I said, is to concentrate the impact that we leave on the landscape to a much smaller area. So for that trail or that campsite, obviously it's not pristine anymore, but by having everyone use that same area, we're able to spare the rest of the outdoors from being destroyed. Okay? So dispose of waste properly. That's a big pet peeve of mine. Like I said, really don't like it when people leave behind trash, wrappers from candy bars and stuff, but also even from first aid. If you have to give somebody first aid, make sure that you're disposing of that waste properly. This moleskin, for instance, is basically a sticker, and it has a backing on it that comes off when you cut it out. You want to make sure that you're not leaving that out there, because that's not part of the natural environment. We want to make sure that we're leaving it as good, if not better, than we found it. So, additionally, leave what you find. The fourth point of leave no trace. What do we think that might mean? Okay, so if we're out hiking and we admire a really cool wildflower, or we see an archaeological artifact, or we see a really cool rock in the trail, we don't want to pick that up, because if you think it's cool, somebody else is going to think that it's cool, right? And if someone who came before you had picked up that rock, flower, etc., you would not have been able to see that. So we want to make sure that we leave what we find. What that doesn't apply to is trash. I personally like to challenge myself when I go outdoors to see how much trash I can pick up off the trail. I highly encourage you on your hike, whether you do this one or wherever you decide to go hiking, to pick up trash as well. Obviously we want to prevent the trash from being there in the first place, but it is very beneficial if we as scouts are out there picking up garbage as well. Okay, so leave what you find. Minimize campfire impacts. Again, we kind of focus a little bit more on the wildfire aspect of it, but we also want to think about, what kind of impact we're leaving on the landscape, even if we aren't as concerned about wildfires. No matter what part of the country or the world you're in, you should always be concerned about starting uncontrolled fires. But if we go to an established campsite, we want to make sure that we're utilizing established fire rings. We don't want to be digging new fire rings, establishing, digging big pits everywhere. If you've been going outdoors long enough, the likelihood that you'll see a really just torn up campsite that people have abused is unfortunately very high. And it's our job as members of the scouting movement to provide an example that others should strive to live up to in our outdoor ethics. So the sixth point is respect wildlife. Similar to what I was talking about with leave what you find, when we talk about, don't pick the flowers, don't pick up rocks, we want to make sure that we're being respectful of wildlife. One thing that you need to remember is that where you're recreating at, where you're going hiking, is these animals' homes. Okay, so if you see deer, elk, marmots, prairie dogs, wherever you are, we want to make sure that we're being respectful of their space. Obviously, being at the elevation that it's at, South Canyon does have rattlesnakes. South Valley. South Valley does have rattlesnakes and other potentially dangerous flora and fauna, which is something that we're going to address here in just a moment. So, and then finally, the seventh point of leave no trace that I think really does a nice job of tying them all together. If you practice the other 6 points of leave no trace as well as the outdoor code, you're being very considerate of others in the outdoors. Okay, we're conserving our resources so that we can get as much use out of them for as long as possible, as well as we're just keeping them of a high quality. So that is requirement 3. For requirement 4, we're gonna go on a hike. Not in this video, but you should go on a hike. Hiking is awesome. And talk with your den about what constitutes a nutritious snack. I'm a big fan of Cliff Bars, other energy bars, granola bars, nice and simple. Again, you want to make sure that you're taking care of packaging with that. I also am a big fan. We're not summiting any peaks today, but I'm a big fan of carrying Snickers bars with me. I always carry a Snickers when I hike a 14er, and I have it on the summit of the mountain. It's my Summit Snickers. So just talk about stuff like that, nutrition. And then finally, we'll cover real quick some of the plants and animals that we might be encountering down in the South Valley. So we have a number of animals here in Colorado that would be classified as dangerous, such as diamondback rattlesnakes, prairie rattlesnakes, and the like. So you need to be cognizant of that, especially if you're going out during the warmer months. You're not going to encounter a rattlesnake on a trail in Colorado in January or February unless it's unseasonably warm. But you need to be thinking about animals like deer, elk, especially if animals are with their young. They might be aggressive if you get close to them. So a good rule of thumb is if an animal reacts to your presence, you are too close to it. So if the deer and the elk are just off in a meadow, frolicking around, doing their thing, take as many pictures as you'd like, admire them from afar. But the instant that you try to walk up to it and feed it or pet it or, heaven forbid, ride it, anything crazy like that, that's when you have now ceased to be respectful of wildlife, and you're now being a nuisance to those animals, which again, you're in their home. You're there for a short period of time. They're going to spend their whole lives in the outdoors. So we also have to worry about, I haven't personally seen any poison ivy or anything down there, but identify, potential plants that might be irritants to you. We've got poison ivy out here in Colorado. Haven't really seen any of the other ones, but I'm sure if I looked hard enough I could find it. And know what you're allergic to. If you know that you're allergic to, gamble oak, and you're going hiking where there's a bunch of gamble oak, just make sure you're steering clear of it. So that concludes really our presentation today. As I said, my name is Will Corcoran. I'm a district executive for Alpine District and Denver Area Council. And I can be reached in the office if you call the main Denver Area Council line at 303-455-5522. They can connect you to me. Or if you'd like to email me, I can be reached at will.corcoran, CORCORAN, @scouting.org. And I'd be more than happy to chat with you more about this or answer any questions that you have. Thank you.